They told us history followed a path. First came the hunters, then the farmers, then the cities, then the temples. A neat little ladder built step by step from survival to civilization. We thought we understood it. We built our textbooks on it, our museums, our sense of who we are. But somewhere in the dry hills of southeastern Turkey, that story collapsed. And the thing that brought it down was a stone. In 1994, a Kurdish shepherd walked across a hill called Göbekli Tepe Potbelly Hill. The sun beat down on the earth as it had for thousands of years. The sheep grazed, the wind blew. The stones beneath his feet didn't look special, just old, forgotten, bone-white lumps poking from the soil. But that shepherd noticed something different, something too straight, too clean, too deliberate. He told someone, and that someone told someone else. Until one day, an archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt looked down at the earth and felt something shift, not just in the dirt but in time itself. What they found there shouldn't have existed. Massive pillars, 16 feet tall, some weighing 20 tons, arranged in circles, carved with animals, foxes, bulls, vultures, snakes. Not scratched crudely, but sculpted in high relief with elegance and mastery. Art from a time before art was supposed to exist. Beneath those pillars was more stone, more circles, layer upon layer buried intentionally like a message sealed in a bottle and thrown into the ocean of history. And then came the carbon dating. 9600 BC, 12,000 years ago. Let that sink in. 12,000 years. That's twice as old as the pyramids, older than writing, older than the wheel, older than farming. According to what we believed, humans at that time were primitive nomadic hunter-gatherers. They wandered in small bands, lived in caves, survived by tracking wild game. They were not supposed to build anything permanent. They were not supposed to have religion, or geometry, or engineering, and yet, someone did. Someone cut and moved monoliths heavier than a truck. Someone carved foxes with cunning expressions and vultures standing over headless men. Someone aligned these stones in ways we still don't fully understand. And when they were finished, they buried the whole thing. On purpose. Stone by stone. As if they feared what they had made, or wanted to hide it, or protect it. Who were these people? Where did they go? And why is no one talking about the fact that this one site unearthed by chance rewrites everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization? Because if Göbekli Tepe is real, and it is then, maybe the rise of humanity didn't begin with the plow, or the pen, or the crown. Maybe it began with something older, something buried, something we forgot, or were made to forget. This isn't just a ruin. It's a question chiseled in stone, one that stares back at us across 12,000 years and asks, what if we're not the first? What if the story of humanity is longer, stranger, and far more mysterious than we ever imagined? And what else might still be waiting just beneath our feet? They say time moves in one direction forward, a clean linear path from primitive ignorance to modern knowledge. That's how we've always pictured it, a slow climb from chaos into order, from the stone spear to the smartphone. But every once in a while, something surfaces that doesn't fit the sequence, something that doesn't belong in the timeline, something too advanced, too early, too impossible. Göbekli Tepe is one of those things. No, it's more than that. It's a wrecking ball through the carefully constructed house of history. When archaeologists began carbon dating the site in the late 1990s, they were stunned. Layer after layer of soil, charcoal, and bone told the same story. This place had been built around 9600 BC. Not just visited, not stumbled upon. Built. with planning, with labor, with intent. At a time when humanity was supposed to be little more than a handful of foragers scattered across the wilds of the earth. To put that in perspective, Göbekli Tepe is older than the wheel, older than agriculture, older than pottery. It was constructed at a time when humans had no permanent settlements, no written language, and no domesticated animals. Just stone tools, fire, and their bare hands. And yet, they moved 20-ton pillars. They carved symbols that spoke of celestial knowledge and mythic creatures. They aligned sacred circles with patterns we still haven't fully deciphered. These weren't desperate survivors. These were people building something that mattered. There were no homes at Göbekli Tepe, no hearths, no food storage pits, no graves. It wasn't a village. It wasn't a fortress. It wasn't even a shelter. It was a sanctuary, a temple, or perhaps something even older than the concept of a temple. The mainstream narrative tells us that religion came after farming, that once humans settled down and organized into societies, they developed belief systems to explain the world around them. But here, the sequence appears reversed. There were no crops, no cities, and yet there was worship, meaning, ritual. What does that say about us? What if religion wasn't the result of civilization, but its cause? What if the first thing we built wasn't a house, but an altar? It's hard to overstate how radical that idea is. It challenges everything we think we know about human development. The common view says we started with hunger, with necessity. That survival drove our innovation. But Göbekli Tepe suggests something else. That even when we were still nomads, we hungered for something greater than food. That we would carve stone with crude tools for reasons that had nothing to do with safety or shelter. That perhaps we saw something, believed something. That made us stay. Because soon after Göbekli Tepe agriculture emerged right there in the same region. The first wheat was cultivated in these very hills. The first domesticated sheep grazed nearby. Was that a coincidence? Or was it a chain reaction? Did the people who gathered to build these monuments need to feed themselves more efficiently? Did the act of gathering for worship demand permanence? And in turn, spark the invention of farming? It's not a comfortable thought. It suggests that everything that followed the rise of cities, of kingdoms, of empires, may have been born from mystery. That our hunger for the sacred may have preceded the hunger for bread. But if that's true, then why was it all buried? Because somewhere around 8000 BC, Göbekli Tepe was entombed. Layer by layer, it was filled in with earthstones, bones sealed up with the precision of a ritual. It wasn't abandoned. It wasn't destroyed. It was hidden, like a secret someone wanted to keep, or a truth someone was afraid we might one day remember. Who buried it? The same people who built it, or their descendants? And more importantly, why mainstream archaeologists shrug. They call it symbolic. They say maybe the rituals changed, maybe the site lost its meaning. But 1,000 years of careful construction doesn't just lose meaning. Something happened. And until we understand what, the mystery remains. We've told ourselves a story about where we come from, a story of progress. But what if that story is wrong? What if it's not a ladder, but a spiral? What if civilization didn't begin once, but many times, rising and falling like breath, with only stones left to remember? And if that's true, what else have we forgotten? The stones speak, not in words, but in symbols etched into the flesh of limestone 12,000 years ago by hands we'll never know. They don't shout, they whisper. And what they whisper unsettles everything. Because carved into the massive pillars of Göbekli Tepe are images that go beyond the world of daily survival. These aren't just animals, they're ideas, patterns, stories. One pillar shows a vulture towering above a headless human figure. Beside it, a scorpion. A circle that may be the sun or the moon or something else entirely. This pillar has a name now, Pillar 43. But some call it the Vulture Stone. And among those who've studied it closely, there's a theory. One that doesn't fit inside our timelines. One that shouldn't even exist. According to a group of astrophysicists in 2017, the arrangement of symbols on Pillar 43 might represent a record of a comet impact. Not just any comet, one that may have struck Earth around 10,900 BC, a cosmic disaster that brought an end to the last ice age. The Younger Dryas. They claim that the animals are zodiacal symbols, passed down orally through the ages, embedded in the stone as a kind of celestial warning. In this view, Göbekli Tepe becomes more than a temple. It becomes a monument to survival, a memory carved in stone. And if that theory is even close to true, then it means the builders of this site were not just worshippers. They were astronomers. They were mythmakers. They were historians. But let's be cautious. Mainstream archaeology doesn't accept this interpretation. They argue the animals are symbolic, yes, but local part of a shamanic worldview, not a coded star map. That the vulture, for instance, is a common figure in Near Eastern belief often associated with the dead. That these pillars served ritual purposes, possibly linked to seasonal changes, hunting cycles, or fertility rites. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's all just metaphor, primitive minds trying to make sense of a chaotic world. But if it's just metaphor, why such precision? Why such effort? These carvings weren't decorative. They were the centerpiece. They were placed at the heart of the circles at the sacred center, where no one would dare step. The symbols weren't just made to be seen. They were meant to be remembered. We don't know their language. We don't know their names. But through these carvings, they still speak. They tell us that 12,000 years ago, human beings were looking up, watching the stars, remembering something, or fearing something, and perhaps trying to warn the future. The ancients didn't separate the heavens from the earth the way we do. To them, a vulture wasn't just a bird, it was a messenger, a soul carrier, a watcher between worlds. The same might be said of the serpent, the scorpion, the crane. Each figure was a sign, part of a language we've long forgotten how to read. And what's most disturbing is how familiar some of it feels. Because these images, these archetypes, they didn't vanish. We see echoes of them in Egyptian hieroglyphs, in Sumerian seals, in the zodiac signs that still govern our horoscopes. What if those were just echoes of a much older truth, a legacy passed down from Göbekli Tepe? If that's the case, then maybe our myths aren't myths at all. Maybe they're memories, broken memories, fractured and retold. But memories nonetheless. We've always assumed that history flows forward, that civilization progresses. But what if it cycles? What if the people of Göbekli Tepe weren't the beginning, but the survivors? The ones who remembered something the rest forgot. Because carved into stone is a language that doesn't fade, it doesn't rot, it doesn't lie. And even though the names are lost, the message remains, hidden in the vultures and snakes, in the patterns that match the sky, in the way the stones are placed, not just to stand, but to speak. We don't know exactly what they were trying to say, but we know this: they went to great lengths to say it. They carved it, then they buried it, as if they wanted to preserve it for someone far in the future. Someone like us. Someone who might one day rediscover the stones and listen. And now, we're listening. There are no graves at Göbekli Tepe, no bones arranged in ritual, no ashes of the dead. There are no homes either. No doorways, no hearths, no signs of daily life. Just circles of stone rising from the earth like frozen echoes of some forgotten liturgy. Whatever this place was, it was not where people lived. It was where they came. For what? That's the question that pulls at the edge of your mind the longer you stare into the stone. Every great civilization builds monuments to something larger than itself. But Göbekli Tepe came before civilization. So what was it honoring? What was being summoned through blood and stone, effort and memory? The mainstream answer is religion, a word we use so often it barely means anything anymore. But at its core, religion is the attempt to bridge the seen and the unseen. And Göbekli Tepe was a bridge, a space between the worlds. You feel it in the design, the circles within, circles, the central twin pillars, standing like silent sentinels in the middle of each enclosure. Always two, always facing inward. Not statues of gods, but maybe something stranger. The pillars themselves seem alive. They have arms carved into them, thin stylized hands folded across the belly. No faces, just the suggestion of a body, as if the builders weren't trying to depict a deity, but an idea, a force, a presence, something that couldn't be sculpted, only hinted at. We have no names for these gods, no myth survived, no chants written down. And yet, the stone sings. If you listen long enough, you begin to sense it, a kind of reverence, not for animals, not even for nature, but for something that stood above and beyond, something terrifying, something beautiful. In most ancient temples, the gods are shaped by the culture that made them. They wear crowns, they hold scepters, they demand obedience. But here, there are no thrones, no chariots, no judgment, just animals, symbols, and space. It feels older than myth, older than language, like the first breath of belief itself. Some archaeologists have argued that Göbekli Tepe was a place of seasonal gathering, a kind of prehistoric cathedral where scattered tribes came to perform rituals, perhaps sacrifices to ensure the fertility of the land, the return of the sun, the survival of their people. That theory makes sense in a way, but it also feels too small, too convenient, like trying to fit a dream into a box, because there's something here that doesn't quite fit. The layout of the site, the geometry, the repetition, the deliberate burial, it all points to a depth of meaning that goes beyond mere survival. This wasn't just about rain or crops or game. It was about memory, identity, maybe even fear. Not of death, but of forgetting. What if Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple, but a beacon? A place where the ancient ones returned generation after generation to remind themselves of something they had seen, or learned, or lost. And what if they knew it wouldn't last? Maybe that's why they buried it, not in haste, but with precision. 1,000 years after it was built, the site was filled in. Every circle, every carving, every sacred space covered over with stone and soil. As if the people themselves were closing a book they were no longer meant to read, or protecting it for someone else, someone far in the future. Us. Because nothing else explains the care, the ritualistic layering, the way it was entombed, not destroyed. They didn't want it erased. They wanted it preserved, sealed, like a message in a bottle cast across 10,000 years of silence. So we return to the question, who or what was Göbekli Tepe built? For we may never know the name, we may never speak the prayer, but we can still hear the echo, in the shape of the stones, in the silence of the circles, in the haunting absence of everything else. Whatever they believed, it was worth carving into stone. It was worth gathering for. It was worth burying, and it was worth remembering, even if it took 12,000 years. It wasn't erosion that covered Göbekli Tepe. It wasn't time or wind or sand slowly creeping over the stones. No, it was us. We buried it. Sometime around 8000 BC, more than 1,000 years after it was first built, something changed. The circles of stone were no longer open to the sky. The carvings were no longer touched by sunlight. One by one, each enclosure was filled in, not destroyed, not dismantled, but entombed. Stone, gravel, broken bones, crushed tools, all layered carefully as if following a ritual, as if sealing something away. Why, this isn't how ruins normally disappear. Abandoned places fall apart. They collapse. The jungle takes them. The desert eats them. But Göbekli Tepe was preserved. On purpose. Like a secret. And that's the part no one likes to talk about. Because it suggests something terrifying, that those who built it, those who carved the vultures and snakes, who aligned the circles and raised the twin pillars, they came back. They looked upon their creation and chose to hide it, chose to erase it. Maybe they had a reason. Maybe something had shifted in their world, something they couldn't explain. A threat, a vision, a loss of control. Maybe what was once sacred had become dangerous. Maybe what they worshipped had turned on them. Or maybe they no longer understood what they had made. There's a theory, unproven, controversial, but unsettling, that Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple, but a kind of memory device, a place designed not to store things, but to transmit them. Knowledge, symbols, myths, the foundational code of a forgotten civilization. And if that's true, then burying it wasn't just an act of abandonment. It was a shutdown, a disconnection. What if they feared what would happen if that knowledge continued? What if something was lost, not just physically but spiritually, and the only way to preserve the truth was to hide it? We don't know. We may never know. Mainstream scholars offer simpler explanations. They say cultures evolve, rituals change, new beliefs replace the old. Maybe the builders just moved on. Maybe Göbekli Tepe was no longer relevant to their lives, so they buried it out of respect, like closing a sacred book. But does that explanation feel satisfying? Does it match the evidence? The layers of fill were too precise, too methodical. This wasn't a casual goodbye. This was deliberate. This was final. And what happened after? That's where things get stranger. Within a few centuries, agriculture appeared across the region. The world changed. The old ways disappeared. New settlements rose. Grain was sown. Animals were penned. The hunter-gatherer world was gone, replaced by something else. It's as if Göbekli Tepe marked a turning point, a gate between two epochs. Before it, a world we no longer remember. After it, the world we inherited. But the gate was closed, buried. Maybe that was always the plan. Maybe it was meant to sleep for 10,000 years, waiting for us to uncover it, waiting for the world to become old enough, quiet enough, skeptical enough to listen. And now here we are, standing in the dust, staring at the stones, digging with our machines, measuring with our lasers, trying to resurrect a story we never knew we'd forgotten. The burial of Göbekli Tepe wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a mystery, a wound in the timeline, a question that refuses to go away. Because when you bury a place like this, you're not just covering up stone. You're hiding knowledge, erasing memory, and perhaps most disturbing of all, you're admitting fear. Fear of what it meant. Fear of what it revealed. Fear that it might one day be found again. And now, it has. Truth we like to think is something we dig toward, that the deeper we excavate, the clearer the past becomes. But with Göbekli Tepe, the opposite has happened. The deeper we go, the more uncertain everything becomes. Because this place doesn't just challenge a few facts, it threatens an entire structure of belief about who we were, how we evolved, and where it all began. And not everyone's ready to face that. Mainstream archaeology has tried to absorb Göbekli Tepe into the narrative without breaking the frame. They call it an anomaly, a unique, isolated site, a one-time convergence of favorable conditions. They argue that advanced hunter-gatherers, yes, still nomads, gathered seasonally worked together and left behind this monumental religious site before disappearing back into the wild. That the site is exceptional, not representative. That it changes the nuance, not the foundation. But there's a growing number of voices who see something else. Not a fluke, but a fingerprint. Not an anomaly, but a remnant. They ask, what if Göbekli Tepe wasn't the beginning of something, but the last surviving trace of something older? What if it wasn't built by hunter-gatherers on the brink of agriculture, but by the descendants of a civilization already lost? These voices don't come from universities. They don't publish in peer-reviewed journals, but they gather followers. Filmmakers, rogue historians, engineers, astronomers. They point to similarities between megalithic sites across the world, Stonehenge in England, the Moai of Easter Island, the temples of Malta, the giant blocks of Baalbek in Lebanon. They ask why so many ancient sites built oceans apart share similar construction techniques, astronomical alignments, even mythological symbols. Is it coincidence, parallel evolution, or something deeper? Some suggest a lost global civilization, a forgotten ancestor of all known cultures, wiped out by catastrophe. Others go further, hinting at beings from the stars, ancient knowledge handed down from the sky, technology lost in time, civilizations erased not by war, but by water fire or silence. Of course, the academic world recoils, and maybe it should. Most fringe theories collapse under scrutiny. The evidence is thin, the assumptions are wild, and yet, the questions remain. Göbekli Tepe is real. It exists. It breaks the rules. It doesn't care what we believe. And that alone gives space for speculation to take root. Because truth doesn't thrive in silence. When the official explanations feel incomplete, other stories rise to fill the void. And in that gap between stone and skepticism, something ancient stirs. It's tempting to pick a side, to dismiss the mystery, or to chase it into madness. But maybe there's another way. Maybe what Göbekli Tepe demands isn't belief or denial, but humility. A willingness to admit how little we know. A pause in the arrogance of modernity. We assume we've reached the peak, that the past was a dim corridor we've since outgrown. But standing in the shadow of those pillars, 12,000 years old, carved by hands unknown, it's hard not to feel small. And maybe that's the point. Göbekli Tepe doesn't ask us to believe in gods or aliens or lost empires. It simply asks us to look again, to question the line we've drawn from then to now, and to wonder what might be hiding still buried beneath our feet. In that sense, the real conflict isn't between mainstream and fringe science and myth. It's between curiosity and comfort, between those who protect the past and those who dare to reopen it. Because if one site can survive 12,000 years of silence, what else is waiting to be found? Göbekli Tepe is the oldest, but it is not alone. Far beyond the Anatolian plains, across deserts and oceans and jungles, other stones stand. Quiet, immense, impossible. Stonehenge in England, the Moai of Easter Island, the unfinished obelisks of Aswan, the precision-cut blocks of Puma Punku in Bolivia, the trilithons of Baalbek in Lebanon, each weighing hundreds of tons, fitted together with uncanny precision. And wherever these monoliths appear, they bring with them the same quiet discomfort. They don't belong. They sit like questions, heavy, silent, and unanswered. And the most haunting part, the similarities. Different continents, different cultures, different ages, and yet the same building techniques, the same astronomical alignments, the same serpentine symbols carved into stone. Animals that don't belong to the region. Stars mapped with mathematical accuracy. Always the same stone. Circles, twin pillars, doorways to nowhere eyes that never blink. Is it coincidence, convergent evolution? Did scattered human groups simply arrive at the same solutions driven by instinct and necessity? That's the mainstream answer. It's neat, it's rational, but it leaves something out. It leaves out the intuition, the uncanny familiarity that settles in your bones when you realize these people never met, and yet they were building the same dream. What kind of dream spans oceans? Some believe there was a common teacher, a forgotten ancestor civilization older than any we've written down. Not global in the way of satellites or steel, but connected by memory, by movement, by myth. A culture that lived before the flood, before the end of the last ice age, before history restarted. Others see something more unthinkable, contact with something not human, something that appeared to early humans in the form of light or sound or fire from the sky, something that left behind knowledge, geometry, astronomy, language, the gift of stone, and then disappeared, leaving only stories. The Dogon people of Mali, who spoke of Sirius B before it was discovered, the Hopi and their star ancestors, the Sumerians and the Anunnaki, the Egyptians and the sky boat of Ra. Are these coincidences, archetypes, or are they fragments of an older shared memory? These are dangerous ideas. They blur the line between history and mythology, between what we can prove and what we feel. And yet they persist, because the more we uncover, the more the past begins to feel like a palimpsest, a scroll written over many times, hiding layers beneath layers. Göbekli Tepe may be the first page, but it's written in a language that appears again and again in the shadows of every continent. Even the layout of the site, the central pillars, the radial enclosures, echo forms found at much younger sites, as if others were trying to remember, trying to rebuild something lost, not perfectly, not completely, but with fragments, with instinct. We assume that time moves like a river always forward, but the stones tell a different story. They suggest cycles, great rises, catastrophic falls, civilizations reaching upward, then vanishing, leaving only silence, until someone else begins again. Maybe we are one of those cycles. And maybe Göbekli Tepe isn't just a mystery, it's a mirror, a reflection of something we've forgotten about ourselves. A whisper from a time when the human spirit reached for the stars, not with rockets, but with stone. When memory was sacred, and time was not linear. What would it mean if we are not the pinnacle? What if we are not the first? What if everything we've built, our towers, our systems, our sense of progress, is just another repetition? Another echo in the dust? Göbekli Tepe has no answers, only questions. But sometimes questions are louder, and they are being asked all over the world. The deeper we dig, the older the mystery becomes. Göbekli Tepe was never meant to be found, not by us, not now, and yet, here it is. The Earth kept it sealed for 12,000 years, through ice, flood, empire, and silence. It waited, quiet, patient, until the ground gave way beneath a shepherd's foot, and the memory came back to life. But it's not just memory we've unearthed. It's something older than memory. something buried in the marrow of who we are. Because Göbekli Tepe doesn't just rewrite history, it questions the very shape of it. The notion that time flows cleanly forward, that knowledge accumulates, that civilization begins once and grows forever upward. No. This place suggests something far more unsettling. That history is circular, that we've been here before, that we have risen, and we have fallen, and we will rise again. That maybe we are not the first species to unlock the stars with stone, to read the sky, to carve our truths into the bones of the earth. That maybe somewhere along the way something was lost, something fundamental, something we can't even name but feel when we stand among these ruins. And now that we've found it, we can't look away. We stare into those pillars like mirrors, and what stares back is not a god or a builder, but a question. What did we forget? What are we still forgetting, and why did they bury it? Was it fear, shame, mercy, or was it hope? Did they bury it for us? Did they know the flood was coming? Did they understand that memory alone wouldn't survive? That to carry a message 12,000 years into the future, you had to carve it in stone and let the wind bury it? We think we're modern, enlightened. We stare at screens. We map the universe. But our ancestors, whoever they truly were, looked at the stars with bare eyes and saw deeper than we do now. They remembered something. And maybe in this place, we are beginning to remember too. Not the names, not the rituals, but the feeling that we are part of something vast, that the ground beneath our feet is not empty, that there are stories still sleeping in the earth, waiting. Göbekli Tepe was the first to wake. It will not be the last. And so I leave you with this. If this is what lies beneath one hill in Turkey, what else is out there? What cities sleep beneath the jungle? What temples lie broken under desert winds? What truths have been drowned beneath oceans turned to myth, dismissed as legend? And what happens when we find them? Because once the stones begin to speak, they don't stop. And the oldest ones speak the loudest.